Alright, I want to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this video. This one isn't so much moon related as it is the magnetosphere and the properties as to why we don't leave it. However, it's more based into what we are because of it. This is going to be kind of more philosophy and spiritual based. It's something I want to talk about having to do with gravity, having to do with electronegativity and the influence of the electron having influence or not with that is potentially 85% of everything that we're not, the 5% of matter that we're made up of, and the ideas that come from everything back to the Big Bang because of the basic principles of gravity and our understanding of philosophy, basically, and the science that has come from these questions. So these videos, there's the warning. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm just some dude with a phone that's got some opinions and ideas, and I'm gonna throw them out there. So I want to make a little video about gravity. I've noticed everyone seems to have a problem with understanding the basic concept of it, and I wanted to point out that there are so many ideas as to how to make it, and all of them seem to have serious flaws, and even the tops of their fields aren't really sure as to exactly what it's made of and how to make it. So I wanted to point out that nobody's idea is wrong, however, nobody's idea is right at the moment. I made a couple videos about the potentials of the magnetospheres being pre-existing, that's gravitational fields already being where matter falls into. And so the Earth and various places like that have various gravitational fields have fallen into those places that already existed and had them. So it's not exactly the iron core, and that's why like Uranus and Neptune show crazy examples of why the atmospheres can be outside of them, as opposed to like Mars doesn't have one, and so it doesn't have a magnetic or an atmosphere, as they say. It's like the Earth's because of our magnetosphere, and all of the various differences that show that like why Enceladus as opposed to Ganymede has such different magnetospheric properties, even though the cores and the variables of properties are similar. There's so many reasons why we can't actually put our finger on what gravity is. However, I have an idea that no one seems to be presenting, and I wanted to go ahead and voice that, and hopefully, maybe someday it'll pop up as something that I'll be like, yeah, remember when I pointed that out? That's cool that maybe someone actually did a study on it. Well, I'm starting to think that gravity is subject to the molecular structures of itself, such as microgravity seems to be when you hit the level of the mesosphere, where you just, molecular structures are ionized and destroyed, and there's the heavier elements that start to rise above that point. Not too bad, just some properties in which they can't stay bonded together, and covalent bonding doesn't work because of the free radicals, and it just it loses the gravitational field. However, if you go too low, the same thing happens. We get the bends. The molecular structures just seem to break down. The pressures do the same type of thing as they do when we go up. So at least our molecular structures, the gravity that we know of, the things that we're confined to, like a fish, if you lower half of its tank, it is confined to its pressure that the water had in. So you take half the water out, it's going to feel like it's being squished, like our atmospheric density, our barometric pressures and stuff like that. They can give people arthritis or make them feel like they have a headache, things like that. And they have shown that these compounds that we're made of, each individual species, each individual thing is made up of a different type of molecular compound. However, these molecular compounds react in their own way to gravity. All, of course, react within the state that molecular compounds are confined to, the same. So it's not like, a tree is going to fall faster or slower than I am, and Newton, everybody has shown why, and there's no disputing this. It's just the molecular compounds, while in this particular point, are confined to this gravitational center. So there's, like the Hubble falls up, there are various things that don't fall down once you go a certain height, then they start coming back up, or a certain depth down, height down. So this is something that I found kind of interesting because nobody's talking about what gravity is, but we're all talking about gravity like this.
Got it. Interesting. Gravity is one thing that I want to
You're still hooked up on gravity?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm always hooked up on gravity.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
As you should be.
well, since we've talked last, I've been reading a lot about it. And one of the things that confuses me the most is that we don't really understand what gravity is. We know its effects, we can measure them, we know how to measure them, we know what the mass is involved, but we don't really know what gravity is.
There's a similar question in the book, but they got a little more philosophical than you just did. But they both lean philosophical. It's science can describe how gravity works.
I want to point out really quick that the video talking about the electron being the soul and electronegativity and dark energy and dark matter and the variables of how those can only interact with the opposites of them at a certain point and the influences they have on each other. The video that is talking about that touches on this, why it would be more of a philosophical debate, because, well, are we not the properties that are the exact opposite of the majority of the properties that are outside of us? So again, this would be more of a philosophical debate as to our gravitational center seems to be more like a placement or a point of relativity that is confined due to what we are. And so we can be stardust, as he talks about in other videos. However, it seems to be gravitational centering is defined to us because we are the 5% of what he talks about earlier, or later, depending on which video you watch first.
But can they describe why it works?
Can we?
So this is the how-why
Yeah.
duality here. And allow me to just answer it from a how-why point of view, and then we can apply it to gravity after I say that. In science, if we can describe how something works and predict its future behavior, we claim to understand it and we move on. You can ask a deeper question about why is there gravity? What is the meaning? What is the purpose? And go ahead, but I'm good with what I've done, and I can land a spacecraft on Mars inside of a crater in a hole-in-one using my understanding of gravity, so I'm pretty good with it. Okay?
No, it's not okay, because bottom line, you don't have 5G, you can't see an X-ray gamma telescopic capabilities, you don't have anything on the moon when, you know, that'd be nice if you were actually on Mars, but that's the Atacama Desert, and all of this is a bunch of fucking political national jerk-off where you and the rest of the fucking congressmen that are sporting each other to get the same contracts sent to the same 50 contractors like Lockheed Martin and all the various Boeing fucking assholes, that of course, you know, will all be able to pay their mortgage and thousands of people get jobs and the system works because of it. However, bullshit. If you knew what it was, then we'd be far greater than we are, but you don't know what it is and you don't know how to come up with a better theory than just kind of winging it. So you've used what the Russians have figured out. You've got orbital capabilities. You can throw something up there and it falls back down another place. You've dropped it in places where there's a very little chance of human survival because of the radiant environment, the lack of oxygen, and the high elevation. So we're up in the mountains of Chile and we're hanging out trying to figure out actually what gravity is and how to control things with greater signals like China and Russia's new 5G systems. But go ahead, continue on.
So I'm not distracted by the more philosophical side of that. Why does it work? Okay. Einstein, so Newton was deeply puzzled by how you can have something called, in which he coined the phrase, action at a distance. Okay? He wrote down the equation that worked. He wrote the equation. The moon goes around the Earth, Earth goes around the sun, the moons of Jupiter go around Jupiter. He accurately described that with his equations of gravity. Okay? He said,
created science.
One day I think we're going to find some way that they're connecting to each other, but I don't know what that is right now, but I know my equations work. He called it spooky. It was spooky to him. That's his word. Spooky action at a distance. All right. Fast forward 300 years. 300? No. Fast forward 230 years. Get to Albert Einstein. Gravity is the curvature of space and time. And you're moving.
Don't forget about things like, you know, the Einstein crosstown to the south and all of the variable anomalies that come with the light bending, and all of his theories having these strange contradictions or irregularities to it, so it's undefinable with these certain objects. Continue.
On the curvature of that fabric. That's gravity. Oh my gosh, is it even a force then? Is it even, so there's no need to think of it as an action at a distance. And in a phrase first uttered by, I think it was John Archibald Wheeler, a student of Einstein, and I learned relativity from John Archibald Wheeler. In fact, that's where I met my wife, in relativity class in graduate school. It's space, so matter tells space how to curve, space tells matter how to move. It moves along the curvature of space. You don't need an action at a distance. There is no action. It can't do anything else but do that.
Outside of what else there is that isn't it having influence on it.
It's like you have a funnel and you take a ball and you roll it on the funnel. The ball can only do what that funnel tells it to do. And
the funnel is held in place by the gravitational center that pre-existed, holding the funnel there and pulling the thing down into the center of the funnel. That's still neglecting action.
it'll if you give it a sideways motion, it'll start spinning around. There's no magic hand coming in there. It is following the curvature of its space-time continuum.
So the gravity that made all of that was influenced by the matter that was the gravitational center that created itself in the funnel and was holding the funnel itself. All of this is still proved Newton true.
This construct that you provided for it. So now, I can describe what gravity is doing. I even have a mechanism for it. Are you going to still ask me why is there gravity?
Yes.
Is that answer not fulfilling enough to you, even in the why
No.
department? You say, well, why would a particle curve space? You can just keep doing that. That's fine. But is there a point where you'll be satisfied with the answer? Oh, that answers my why.
When you can solve what dark matter and dark energy are, as you are just so confused as to what 85% of everything that isn't what we are is.
I can say, well, why did this half liter of water drop off the edge here? Well, it's no more, the forces are imbalanced. And it did. No, but why did it fall? Well, there's nothing holding it up. Why did it? There's a point where it's not especially productive to continue to think about the world that way. Because what I'm claiming is answers to the how, when you understand the how enough, are tantamount to having answered the why question.
That is too Betsy DeVos and nationalist stance for my taste. I disagree. While I do adhere to upholding the studies, the relevant studies, the case studies, the peer-reviewed studies, all things that point to why you would accept the why of now, the next question, the consistent drive, that perseverance of humanity seeking more knowledge is the only fucking good thing about us. Otherwise, we wage war, we fist fuck each other over every single element that should be abundant within the elemental fucking universe he's talking about. So this is pointless. This is just more bullshit.
That's all. That's what I'm telling you.
Tantamount in terms of the ability to measure it and accurately use it.
Correct. So we can say, okay,
But isn't it
you
still
got a bald head.
curious?
We can say, well, why did you go bald? Well, okay, the hair follicles had a... That's what I'm telling you.
Tantamount in terms of the ability to measure it and accurately use it.
Correct. So we can say, okay,
But isn't it
you
still
got a bald head.
curious?
We can say, well, why did you go bald? Well, okay, the hair follicles had a, when you start in your late 20s, or when did you go bald? When did you start losing your hair? Probably late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
That's common. If you have your hair when you're 30, you'll probably have it for the rest of your life. That's how that goes. You start losing it right going up until you're 30. So you can say, well, the hair follicle does not producing the keratin, whatever. We get the explanation. Then you say, well, why does the hair follicle stop doing that? Then you say, oh, well, because the DNA has it pre-coded about the hair kind of thing. Well, why does the DNA have the hair? Well, because so...
Right, but we know far more about how and why people go bald than we do about what gravity really is, correct?
I'm telling you, gravity really is the curvature of space and time. That gets us the Big Bang and everything we've ever known.
5%.
Space and time, but it's also based on mass, right? It's based on the amount of mass.
Any concentration of matter and energy or energy will curve the fabric of space.
Electronegativity will
And
as well.
the movement of matter on that fabric of space and time, we call gravity. And I'm good at that.
Electronegativity will as well.
Okay, but you seem a little oddly defensive about something that's scientific.
No, I'm just sound good with the...
But you are, because you're kind of defending it.
No, you can say, well,
Defending
why does
Why
matter...
you need to know why.
No, why
That's what you're
does...
saying.
No, I'm saying, why does matter and energy curve the fabric of space and time? You can ask that.
Oh,
Electronegativity. I just wanted to point this one other part of the video out before I left off with this 2 hours and 20 minutes of their complete nonsense and intellectual bullshit.
Same principle.
that's a giant one, though, man. 85%.
It's 85% of gravity. So yeah, and you add that to the dark energy. We don't know what that is either.
Right.
Dark matter, dark energy comprise 95% of everything that's driving the universe.
I just want to point out that what he's about to talk about and their little conversation over the next minute or two here has to do with consciousness and our ideals on whether or not morality, consciousness, empathy, and apathy, and the various natures of human beings have to do with transference of electrons. The dark energy would be nothing more than the opposite of that. And what is the opposite of that? Electronegativity. So, with all of the electromagnetic forces surrounding us causing gravity, creating magnetospheres, creating everything that keeps everything off of itself, or so on and so forth. That's why God itself would have influence over an electron, why the singularity of itself, being all of everything that it is not, which is us, would need to influence us, as electronegativity cannot touch electromagnetic forces. It's the positive and negative polarities forcing to touch. They never do. So, of course, if there is influence to be had, it's not so much consciousness as it is a direct force of the consciousness that is what we call an electron, and the various movements within our bodies and its molecular structures that we have defined, such as the recent results of studies about microtubules and how all the proteins and enzymes and all of the travelings and breakdowns of our cell could potentially create consciousness within each individual layer of our bodies. And so that's why we have muscle memory, and we can remember in different ways depending on our diet and various things. So they're starting to tie in all of the possibilities that biochemistry and various subatomic influences have to do with consciousness, and are starting to define the soul as an electron, which, of course, here, if we're talking about if they're going to scoff at God, which I'm not adhering to any religion or any sense of personal belief in a sentient being in control or influencing all that is. However, I am defining it by that, since that's what we're talking about here. And if we're talking about things that are defined by that, then if we're defining the soul through science as electrons' movements, thus the synapses and everything having to do with electrons' movements, covalent shells and the various molecular structures that they create by bonding. This is clearly what they're talking about, but scoffing at the same time is disregarding electronegativity, which causes electromagnetic forces, which causes the gravity and all that is the opposite of itself, but that would create everything that religion has to talk about, and now everything science is talking about, all being the same thing, and that is the great nothing that is the divine everything is control of the subconscious that is the living entity that is all. In all religions, it's pretty much what they're all saying, and now this is them as scientists scoffing at the fact that they're saying the same thing.
So everything we know and love, the chemistry, the physics, the biology, life, planets, stars, is 5% of the universe.
Now,
So people, theologians and folks say, well, maybe God is in the other 95%.
maybe.
Okay, but yeah.
Maybe God's dark matter. Would that be crazy?
Well, people say that.
Surprise!
Yeah. But I don't know why dark matter would care about
Gay people?
whether, yeah.
Doesn't care about individual personality or personality traits, however, it cares about the personality's existence. Individual electrons' movements have to do with the 5%. The 5% cannot be within the rest, otherwise it would be the rest, in which the dark matter, dark energies that they're talking about. So if it cannot be a part of, it has to be influenced by. Thus, anything that is influenced by, Newton states very clearly, would be affected by. The cause and effect has the same purpose on it as it does on all things. Thus, we have an effect on it, it has an effect on us. So God, us, it is influenceable both ways.
Was it about chicks driving cars?
Yeah, depending on which religion you're in, right? Yeah, all the religions got their
What are
thing.
you wearing?
Yeah.
Don't you know God?
What is the...
Come on, I'm dark matter. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, just in letters from an physicist, which isn't out yet, but again, I don't know how the hell you got the book, but it's there's an entire chapter where I am conversing with people who are strongly religious. There's a conversation I have in there with an Orthodox Jewish person, a Muslim, multiple fundamentalist Christians, and we're talking about the age of the earth and why. Why do we think one way or another? And so there's a lot of intimate stuff in there that I generally don't go public with, but I did it one-on-one with those who had written to me about these challenges they were facing in life, and they wanted to know what an astrophysicist had to say about it.
What's the youngest?
And I'm going to leave you with this fine little study from Nottingham University.
The liquid oxygen. It's a very nice blue colour today. So now let's try it. Here's the magnet again. And if I take the liquid oxygen, you can see I can pull it right up here. Because it's not as magnetic as my keys, but you can see there's a really big difference. It sticks to the magnet.
So, just want to point out a study that most people aren't aware of and things that most people don't get to play with and see with their own eyes. There's oxygen working the same as most of our transitional metals, and might explain why they are using water as most of the properties for the shielding of all of the International Space Station equipment. And anytime we have suits with spacewalks, we have coolant systems within them. That seems to be the greatest active shielding we can come up with at the moment. And of course, this will only work a little bit better, but just like transitional metals, within the active shielding that we're already surrounded by. So this is just very cool, huh?